If you like The Daniel Blair Show, you will love Main Event Moto. Come join producer Joe and I at patreon.com/maineventmoto, where we talk Supercross, we talk motocross, and deliver 3 long-form podcasts per week with no commercials. Again, that's patreon.com/maineventmoto, or you can click the link in the bio. Thanks for watching, and enjoy this week's episode of The Daniel Blair Show.
The Daniel Blair Show. Sponsored by Motosport.com, Mika Metals, Race Tech, ASV Inventions, and Guts Racing.
So many storylines heading into Budds Creek, but there can only be 10 lead stories. And we start with Chase Sexton, who was not at Unadilla and is 3 SMX races away from moving on from KTM and starting a whole new chapter at Kawasaki. I have to admit my interest in 450 racing was dented pretty bad when Chase opted to sit out the final 2 rounds of the championship, as his Washougal and Ironman Moto 1 rides were the spiciest racing we've seen this summer. Yes, Eli gave us a couple motos of fun early, but nobody has challenged Jett like Chase has the last month, and with him not on the gate, the energy felt a little flat. I guess we'll wait until Charlotte. Now, I've been hypercritical of Chase's move away from KTM the past few months. Why? Because he's looked unreal on that bike the past 2 seasons, with some of the most dominant rides we've seen in recent history coming from that rider-bike team combo. Hangtown and MetLife come to mind. Personnel-wise, I always saw it as a good fit too, but apparently he does not, and he's decided to bounce. Moving forward, however, I'm going to change my tone a bit and give him the benefit of the doubt, because after reviewing some recent history of rider-bike team combos that maybe didn't make a lot of sense in the moment, turned out to be incredibly successful. As much as the bike does matter, the relationship between the rider and the team matter more. And if Chase really doesn't like it there, then maybe he will be better somewhere else. Cooper Webb left a disgruntled relationship with Yamaha, went straight to KTM in 2019, gelled with the team and won the Supercross Championship the first year. A few years later, when the relationship went sour, he bounced the team and the bike, went back to Yamaha, gelled with that team, and won the championship again. Eli Tomac crushed it at Kawasaki for years, stacking wins and championships along the way, but when the relationship went sour, he bounced to Yamaha, gelled with that team, and immediately won the Supercross Championship the first year. Jason Anderson left the friction at Husqvarna and joined Kawasaki in 2022, gelled with the team, and almost won the Supercross Championship that season in the first year. Word from behind closed doors, it was the relationship that blossomed right away, which led to a rebound in Hombre's career. And how about Chase? He won the 2023 Supercross Championship on a Honda, but the relationship had gone sour, so he bounced to KTM, gelled with the team, and won his first Pro Motocross Championship that summer in the first year. Quite the pattern. So what's the point? Well, mood wins. Relationships matter. Workability matters. Of course, the bike does too. I'm not saying it doesn't, but in the early days when a rider and a team are in the honeymoon stage, there's a really good chance for success. And for both Chase Sexton and Eli Tomac, the bike might not matter as much here. The fresh start and the reset might matter more, and I'm willing to sit back and watch this all play out before I fully judge the decision that Chase has made by leaving KTM. Because recent history tells us that since at least 2019, between Webb, Tomac, and Sexton, switching teams typically leads to a championship in year 1 of a new relationship. Now this sounds all lovely, but the biggest issue to this theory, of course, is that freak show Jett Lawrence loves his bike, loves his team, and will most likely sour everyone's relationships by February. Caden Dudney is lead story number 9, and his debut at Unadilla was pretty dang good for a kid who turned 16 3 weeks ago and is coming off back-to-back broken arms. Caden went 7-13 on the day, but the 13th was from a little goof up. He was actually running inside the top 5 for over half the moto and was on his way at one point to a 5th overall. Not bad. Now, I could go back in time and present you all with some stats from riders who absolutely crushed their debut, Eli Tomac being the most notable, but I'd rather keep it current so it's more relatable to the times we're in. Let's take a look at Jett Lawrence, Haiden Deegan, Chase Sexton, and Hunter Lawrence and the first 4 motos of their pro career. Jett went 21-8 at his first race and 24-30 at his next. Haiden went 24-34 at his first race, then 16-10 at his next. Chase went 19-10 at his first race, then 15-9 at his next, while Hunter Lawrence went 11-12 at his first race, then 37-2 at his next. Whoa! Hunter was 19 years old and had some GP experience, so for him to grab a podium right away is not a shocker. But for Jett and Haiden, they were 16 years old for their debut, while Chase was 17 for his. Interesting to look back. I'm not surprised with this finish by Caden, but I kind of am. He's always shown speed, but outside of Loretta's, it's always been a little messy on the 250, going all the way back to his first combine at Ironman in 2023. I wasn't expecting to see him look that composed, and he really wasn't rattled by the pro atmosphere or the pressure he was under multiple times during the day. Yes, there was a fall that ruined a crazy good debut, but I saw enough to feel comfortable saying that his transition to the pros will be seamless, at least outdoors. Supercross is another world, and he will need to make some serious gains over the offseason, but when it comes to motocross, zero issue. Not so much for my boys. Yes, my boys, Cole Davies and Landon Gibson, who both made their debuts at Unadilla as well. Now, I could sit here and give a list of excuses to defend them, but my credibility with the fans of this sport is more important to me than their feelings. That was terrible. I can't and won't defend it, and I'm hoping you turn it around really quick at Budds Creek. And don't worry about not qualifying, Landon. I didn't make my first national at 16 years old either, and I turned that into a Lights Regional Arena Cross Championship and a sort of successful YouTube show. I'm sure you'll be fine. Lead story number 8 is Drew Adams, who had one of the weirdest days of the summer, taking top qualifier honors for the first time in his career, then followed it up with a 15th overall. Yikes! Instead of dissecting how this went down, I'll instead focus again on our qualifying system that really doesn't make any sense. Why do we do it this way? Why is it based on a stopwatch and not a race? Simplicity? Lack of time? I mean, for real, why is it that in a racing sport we take a racer's fastest time by themselves to qualify them into the races? I get there's a tradition, but in reality, there was a tradition in the past that was so much better, and I'd like to give you all a little reminder on how things used to go down back in my day. When I raced motocross back in the day, the top 10 in championship points were seeded into the motos. Those 10 did not need to qualify. Even their gate picks for Moto 1 were set. And instead of using a stopwatch to fill the gate, they had heat races and an LCQ to get in. If I remember correctly, they would take 12 riders from 2 heat races to get the gate to 34, then the LCQ would take 6, and the gate would be full at 40. Now, I don't know if it's because of amateur day or whatever reason they would rather cram it all into one day, but going back to a 2-day format would allow the series to run a better qualifying system without putting everything on a solo fast lap. Now, maybe my opinion is outdated, and maybe I'm alone on this one, and that's fine. But when a rider is fastest in qualifying yet finishes 15th overall in the motos, at a minimum it opens up a discussion on if our system is really the best for a racing sport, especially when we have a history of other formats. As a fan of this sport, I'd way rather watch some heat races and get to see more racing and battles, and I believe it would make race day live way more fun and would dramatically boost the numbers. I mean, imagine if Supercross just took the fastest individual lap time to qualify riders to the main event every week. That would be lame, and it is the one downfall to Triple Crowns in my opinion, but those only happen 3 times a year. Come on, let's make a change. Change it back. More gate drops, less stopwatch. The Unadilla track is lead story number 7, and I don't want to be a complainer 2 segments in a row, but I gotta point out the obvious. That track did not look very fun. The first moto conditions looked like a second moto, and I'm not sure if the prep was on purpose or accident, but it had muddy and dusty spots, has most likely given suspension guys nightmares since Saturday, and ultimately it didn't make the racing super enjoyable to watch, outside of Jett's first lap in Moto 2. Without knowing the strategy or the details, it would be disrespectful for me to fully trash the track, but for a race that is usually one of my favorites, I didn't like it. The one change that I know of for a fact was this year they did have a Loretta Lynn's regional qualifier at Unadilla in June, and the track typically doesn't have any racing on it before the national, so I had to assume that played a role in the prep. I actually love that they go to national tracks for Loretta regionals. I think that all regionals should be at these tracks. It's one of the cooler things that they do, but maybe not Unadilla moving forward. I do like when tracks have their own character. I like different styles of prep and condition. So if this was not on accident and was an attempt to be different, I'll applaud the effort. But with the combination of hills and speed and these stupid scoop tires, it just didn't work for me. And outside of Jett and Jo show, I have to imagine the rest of the racers share my feelings. I look forward to the 2026 Unadilla National with prep that makes it one of my favorite tracks of the year. Lead story number 6 is Jorge Prado, and I'll start by saying that one of the hardest parts of doing this show is that I record on Sunday. The episode drops on Tuesday, which means news on Monday could shake up the segments and the stories. When it comes to Jorge, I said last week that I didn't think this crazy idea of leaving Kawasaki for KTM after year 1 of a 3-year deal would actually happen, for a big list of reasons. But after what I saw at Unadilla, and after some things I've heard through the weekend, oh boy, this could happen, or might have happened by the time we release this show. Jorge grabbed the whole shot in Moto 1, and after the improvements we saw at Ironman and the fact that we were at Unadilla, which is typically a good track for European riders, I thought, oh baby, here we go, it's Jorge time. Instead, it was his worst day of the summer in my opinion, and about halfway through Moto 1, I started thinking, yeah, this is gonna happen. Now, I don't know the details of what this all might look like, but as I mentioned with Chase Sexton in the opening of this episode, if you aren't gelling with the team and the bike, then I guess you just move on and go somewhere better. We'll call this the summer of the unhappy. This would be a crazy gamble, though, for both sides, as KTM can't sit here and think that their bike will be a magic switch that just turns this whole thing around. And for Jorge, does he really think that that bike will be a magic switch that turns this all around? Between Chase and KTM and now Jorge and Kawasaki, this is turning into the silliest silly season of all time, and it won't be over if this actually happens. Kawasaki would have an opening on their 450 team, and while the names that have been floating around make sense to some degree, there is one name that actually makes the most sense for that spot, and he happened to have smashed everyone at Unadilla. Jo Shimoda is lead story number 5, and did anyone else catch Weege on the broadcast say that Jo has an offer from Honda, but it wasn't signed yet? After watching Jo take Haiden to Gapplebee's Moto 1, then back it up with a cruiser in Moto 2, would it be crazy to think that Jo wasn't ready to move up to the 450s next year too, and should bypass the whole have to win a 250 title to move up way of thinking? Follow me on this one. Jo has been hesitant to sign on to a future that doesn't have a 450 pathway in it. RJ Hampshire and Justin Cooper have proven that the transition from 250 to 450 is not that steep, and Jo has beat both of them on motocross a lot over the years, and the way he's riding right now, would you rather take Garrett Marchbanks or Ken Roczen in that spot? I know the instant reaction will be, oh, come on, DB, Jo's been a mess for years, quit it with your crazy short-term memory. Wait a second. Jo has finished second in points to Jett Lawrence and Haiden Deegan outdoors. Jo has won 6 Pro Nationals and finished second 11 times on a 250 during the Jett and Haiden eras. He is more than qualified to take the number 2 spot at Kawasaki. This makes way too much sense, and has he really not signed? This, of course, is all contingent on Jorge leaving, which, as of this recording on Sunday, hasn't happened yet. We will get to see Jo on a 450 at the Motocross of Nations in a few weeks, and as much as I'm jumping into the future a bit here, we still have the SMX Playoffs coming up where Haiden Deegan is not safe. This is the best version of Jo I've ever seen, and Hayden's three-peat is not guaranteed. But as silly as this silly season has been, with Eli switching teams and energy drinks, Chase switching teams and energy drinks, and now the thought of Jorge switching teams and energy drinks a real possibility, a Jo Shimoda to Kawasaki 450 deal would not be that out of left field. This sport is loose in 2025. Speaking of Garrett Marchbanks, he is lead story number 4, and his race for a permanent number is looking more likely. Hunter has made his way by. Tom will most likely pass him as well, but Garrett has passed AP, and as long as he holds on to his 21-point lead over Eli, he's safe. This would be an incredible feat for Garrett, who, by the way, won a 250 Supercross in his second season when he was 18 years old. Just wanted to point that out, but one more solid weekend of racing would top off a great season indoors and out for Garrett. Following up on our silliest silly season discussion with Jorge Prado and Jo Shimoda, if Garrett somehow moved into that open 450 spot at Kawasaki, Enzo Timmerman would be the beneficiary of that move, and I have to believe that he would slide right into that 5th spot at PC. Sorry to go back to this whole Jorge thing, but When have we had this much going on over one spot in late August? There hasn't been this much action on and off the bike this late in the season in a while, and between Budds Creek, SMX points, silly season, and some World Supercross news coming, this is one of the funnest times to be a fan of the sport of Supercross and motocross. Haiden Deegan is lead story number 3, and unfortunately for the Deegs, he did not wrap up the title at Unadilla and was unable to make history in the process. If Haiden would have beat Jo Sho, he would have been the only rider in the sport's history to win both 250 Supercross and Motocross Championships around early in the same year, a record that has been done before, but on a 125 with James Stewart. Haiden seemed a little edgy before the day got underway during an interview with JT, where a tease on this rivalry with Jo and a possible championship clinching scenario led Haiden to reply with, "Whatever you want to make up in your mind," which made me laugh out loud, but I have to point out that his respect towards Jo on the podium after both motos was noticed and appreciated. As far as the riding goes, it wasn't his best, but he did make some of the sickest passes of the year on Seth Hammaker both motos, even though it was obvious that he didn't gel with this track and wasn't taking any unnecessary chances just to clinch early. It was one of his smartest and most mature races of the year, maybe ever. Haiden did clinch the title last summer around early, which means that his Supercross championship at Denver this year puts him alone in the record books. As a rider who has won both titles early on a 250, he just didn't do it in the same season. For those keeping track of his stats compared to Jett Lawrence, in 2022, Jett beat Jo Shimoda by 45 points, and as of today, Haiden sits 43 points up on Jo with 1 round to go. Jett and Haiden are about as statistically equal as can be on the 250. Both absolutely cleaned house on the little bikes, and Haiden is a few weeks away from putting a period on his 250 career. But back to James Stewart, so we have some clarity here. In 2004, he clinched both Supercross and Motocross championships 2 rounds early in the same season. There's never been or never will be anyone on the little bike like James, and that argument is not up for debate. Lead story number 2 is the SMX points, and with 1 round to go, Cody Schock and Lux Turner need to bring it this Saturday. We'll start with the 250s. Lux needs 19 points to catch RJ Hampshire and guarantee a spot on the playoff gate, without having to go to the LCQs for 3 straight weeks. 19 points might seem like a lot in this class, but for Lux, his best finish this year was at Redbud, where he grabbed 20 points on the day. That is the easiest math for Lux, and it uncomplicates things as far as other riders are concerned, but it's not his only way in. He is also 12 points behind Dylan Schwartz and 16 points behind Cole Davies. It wouldn't be wise to put all of his hope in someone else's failures, so the simple math is just go get your 20 points like Redbud and bump RJ out. In the 450s, it's very, very similar. Cody is 23 points behind Justin Hill, with his best races of the season being at High Point and Millville, where he grabbed 25 and 24 points at those races. The easiest math is to just go out and get it done at Budds Creek, which happens to be his home track, but catching Hill is not the only way. Cody sits 8 points behind Valentin Guillaume and 11 points behind Mitchell Harrison. Those two, like Schwartz and Davies, are on the hot seat this weekend, and like many, my eyes will be on these guys in both classes. The point structure and playoff seeding rules are one of the best parts of SMX, and for a race that typically wouldn't have much to watch for, these battles change everything for me. This week's lead story is Jett Lawrence, your 2025 Pro 450 Motocross champion, and I'll start with a big congratulations to Jett, who in my opinion is the best motocross racer of all time. What? Really? Yes, really. Now, I know he's still on his way in the record books, and this is no disrespect to the legends before him, but he's the best ever, plain and simple. He's not the GOAT. He's not the king, but nobody has ever ridden a motorcycle like this, and nobody has an 88% motocross win rate at 22 years old, and in reality, he hasn't even hit his prime yet. JT said it best on the broadcast. The first lap in Moto2 was pure insanity, and when they went to the drone shot mid-Moto2, he put on a display of perfect dirt biking, and I think it would be crazy to doubt him anymore, in any way, or say that he has anything left to prove. The generational talent is more than just a talent now. One thing that stood out for me, though, when it comes to his future in the sport is when Johnny O mentioned that the challenge will be keeping Jett motivated moving forward, and finding ways to inspire him will be the focus. This summer was pretty inspired. That was obvious when he bawled his eyes out at Paula at his first race back, and when he said the word manifest 100 times after the race this weekend. For a dude that comes across laid back and silly, he's crazy competitive, and I have to imagine that the knee injury at Glendale sent him off into a terribly dark place, which he's mentioned a time or two. Losing this championship last year, then losing his Supercross title defense this year didn't sit well with him, and he showed us this summer what a pissed off and determined Jett Lawrence actually looks like, and now he's got his number 1 back and wrapped up the championship a round early. But like Johnny O, I'm also concerned with how long he'll stay motivated, and I expressed this back in 2021 on Gypsy Tales, when I kind of sort of predicted all of this.
He's going to go and win who knows how many, like a lot for a long time until he's bored.
But what gives me hope is that Supercross will not be as easy. When you give this dude 35 minutes and all that room to play, he's gonna most likely win the moto, and if it's not every moto, well, try beating him in a championship over the course of 22 motos. But in Supercross, too many things play a role, and as much as Jeremy dominated during his run, I don't believe Jett will have it that easy. I still think he's the clear favorite moving forward. Don't take this out of context, but he will have enough challenges indoors to keep him motivated, and based on his contract, we all know he'll be around for the next 5 years at least. Can Eli make one last run? Will Coop be motivated enough to challenge him again? Will Chase adapt to the Cowie? Will Haiden be everything I hope he is? Is Hunter the one who can take him down? The optimist in me says yes, 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 but the logic in me says no, no, and no. And while we watch this guy crush everybody on most days, we can only hope that a real challenge is coming. To this point, nobody can beat him straight up. Nobody. And as much as that bums some of us out, the fans like me that want parity in a battle, it is what it is for now, and he deserves all of our respect. Nice work, Jetson, and we'll see you next week.
Main event motomerch.com. Main event motomerch.com. Main event motomerch.com.